There is a Malthusian philosophy out there that ties into this whole thing, that manifests a hatred of humanity because humanity is God's highest creation.
So the ultimate executive behind all of this is the bankers?
No, it's not the bankers. It's all Luciferian. I mean, the Luciferians are working with the bankers. The bankers are energized by Luciferian forces, by Luciferian spirits. It's not the bankers, it's all of them. Maybe I should explain to you that Monsieur Perot finally decided that all 12 of the suspects had killed them. They had all killed him. And, of course, that was the secret of the murder on the Orient Express, and that's the secret of the problem we pointed out tonight. They are all involved, but the common denominator is Luciferianism.
They're energized by Luciferianism, but they are human beings acting as agents of this. Who are the human beings? Aren't they all bankers or members of the aristocracy?
No. They are at every level of our society. And, of course, you can get the demonic roots of globalism. You can get James Wardner's Unholy Alliances. You can get Paul Fisher's excellent book, Behind the Lodge Door. You can get Dennis Cuddy's book, The New World, New Age Order. But you'll find the membership list of the Council on Foreign Relations. You can get that by simply writing to 58 East 68th Street, New York City, New York. Get the CFR membership. You can write for the Trilateral Commission. We'll be glad to give you the name. You can get the names of those people. But this is a massive movement with literally millions of people who are energized by the dark side.
Yes, sir. You were talking about a secret club or a secret party. What's the exact name of that?
It never had a name. It was originally, the front organization was called the Round Table in England.
In England.
In England. And when it came to America, the front was the Council on Foreign Relations, according to Professor Quigley and according to certainly all of the evidence that we can find. The Council on Foreign Relations grew directly out of the meetings between Lord Milner's men and the inquiry in Paris back in 1919. And the offshoot of that was the formation of the Royal Institutes in every major Commonwealth nation, and in America, the Council on Foreign Relations, which was, according to Professor Quigley, a front group for J.P. Morgan and the small American Round Table Group.
And it started about 1914, the League of Nations, or what?
Well, the League of Nations started about 1919, 1920.
After the First World War.
After the First World War. The First World War was fought to justify the League of Nations, and when the League of Nations failed, then, of course...
The First World War was about?
The League of Nations, yes.
Unbelievable.
Well, if you'd like to document that...
Is that unbelievable?
Well, I don't mind if you question that. I'd suggest you get my interview with Norman
No, I'm not doubting that. It's just amazing.
Well,
unbelievable is amazing.
Well, we have... Fortunately, an interview I did back in 1980 with Norman Dodd. Now, Norman Dodd was the director of research for the Reese Committee, which was commissioned by the 83rd Congress to investigate the great tax-exempt foundations. And in the course of the investigation, one of his research assistants, Miss Catherine Casey, had the opportunity of going through the early records of the Carnegie Endowment for...
What year was this?
This was, well, she was going... through this in 1953 or 54.
Oh, this is way after.
But the records she was going through were 1908 and 1909, before the Carnegie Endowment was even incorporated. And he tells the stories on the tape. And she found that the members of the board were actually talking about how can we change the world? What's the best way to change the world? And they decided that war was the best way to change the world. And when they decided on that, they said, well, how can we get America into a war? That's what he told me in 1980.
They sat at the round table and said, how can we have some more?
Well, it wasn't the round table. It was the Carnegie Endowment.
In England?
No, in America.
In America.
Right.
All right. Thanks a lot for your time.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes,
Hi.
sir.
What I would like you to do is, I've got a son here that's just starting school, and I'd like you to address the issue of what should be the motivation and the goals of young Christian kids starting off on a career path.
To love the Lord, to know God's Word, that's the most important thing that you can give to your children, because we are headed for very, very bad times. I'm going to have to ask somebody to give me another little glass of water before my voice gives out. But really, you need reading, writing, and arithmetic, phonics, but the most important thing is traditional history. The most important thing really is to learn the fear of the Lord. Freedom does not come from doing whatever you want to. Freedom comes from doing what God tells us to do and following the Ten Commandments. There is no such thing as freedom if there's not restraint. Bring your child up in the ways of the Lord, and that's what we're called to do, and that's the best advice I can give you, sir. And I can tell you that looking back on my life, I'm a little older than you are, but I've got 3 kids, and all of them love the Lord. None of them are doctors, none of them are professional people, but I think maybe that's far more important than all the education I could have given them.
Dr. Monteith, I know you've interviewed Malachi Martin.
Yes.
And I want what's your opinion of him and his writings? And the second question is, do you know what's happened to Linda Thompson? I know you've had some exposure to her, too.
All right, I don't know what's happened to Linda Thompson. Haven't heard from her in a long time. Malachi Martin is one of the most fascinating people around today. I think he's right on as far as his description of what's going on in the Catholic Church. In other words, the Catholic Church has been infiltrated, but the Protestant Church has been infiltrated too. But the primary drive of the Masonic movement was always to destroy first the Catholic Church and then Christianity altogether. And I think that what Malachi Martin says about the Masonic influence, about the satanic rituals are true. And I take that not only because he has said it, but Pope Paul VI, before his early demise, talked about the satanic smoke over the Vatican, and recently an exorcist, he's an archbishop from Africa, a black Catholic, has spoken about the demonic and satanic influence within the Vatican itself. So I don't think there's any question at all. He's right on. And of course, this idea that the Pope wants to lead this whole move towards world government would suggest that perhaps his allegiance is not to the God of the heavens, but to a political agenda. And I think this is rather frightening. I think we are indebted to Malachi Martin for what he's written.
Until I had read the late in his life interview with Norman Dodd, I personally had never heard of the Société Générale de Belgique, but lately on the internet, on some of the conspiracy discussion groups, I've seen speculation that they have... I'm getting to it. I've seen speculation that the Société Générale has co-opted the leadership of the Round Table, the Pilgrim Society, and I'm wondering if you can tell us anything from your research.
Well, I remember spending a couple of weekends with Norman Dodd, a wonderful gentleman, and he used to talk about the Société Belgique. It certainly was a very, very powerful force dealing with Belgian international interests, mining in Africa. I really believe, if you see what's happened in the Congo recently, they've gotten rid of Mobutu, they've gotten rid of Belgium and other interests, and America is moving in. That probably the Société Belgique has been somewhat eclipsed by the Anglo-American power structure. But you know, when you start, you know, who is the final arbiter? Who's really in charge of everything? Who are the 3 men who rule the world? I don't know. But I know who rules all of them, and that, of course, is Lucifer. I also know that if you read occultic writings, they talk about the inner government. They will tell you that Colonel Edward Mandell House, who led the inquiry to Paris in 1919 and was the man who manipulated Woodrow Wilson and really worked to prolong the war, to get America into the war, to ensure that Russia survived. We could spend an evening. Sometime you'll invite me down and I'll tell you the story of Colonel House, because his diary has been intentionally suppressed. It was bought up in 1976 by Times Mirror. So they copyrighted it so it couldn't be copied. It was given to Yale University to be kept for 50 years, available 1976, bought up by Times Mirror, copyrighted so it could be printed. I was there in 80, and they said it's going to be released any day. I called within 6 months. They said it's going to be released any day. They're simply suppressing it. That's how you suppress things. You copyright them. Certainly, Colonel House was part of what's known as the inner government, at least according to the occultists. Société Belgique, where it fits, I can't tell you.
Dr. Monteith.
Yeah. Let me just answer. The papers of Colonel House, his diary, is still back at Yale University. There are only 4 copies in the world, and I know where they all are. And we'll talk about that sometime if you give me another invitation. fascinating, fascinating insight into one of the most evil men in the world. And of course, the only way to understand Colonel Edward Mandell House was to understand that he was an occultist, and that's where his mystical powers came, and how he was able to control President Woodrow Wilson and the prime ministers and premiers of all of the European powers. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Monteith, you briefly touched on something that I really wanted to ask you about. In the World Almanac, 1996, it states that in the United States, we have 158 million Christians of all denominations. If this were to be true, how could a people of one unity and accord allow what's happened